In the quiet hours of the night, when history whispers its secrets to those patient enough to listen, there comes a tale unlike any other, the story of a woman born into danger, sculpted by power, and destined to rule a kingdom that never fully accepted her. Her name was Marie de Medici, a queen forged not by fortune, but by fire. Welcome to History Without Sleep, where the past is not a silent memory, it is a living force, breathing across centuries. Tonight, we dive into a world of schemes, crowns, poison, alliances, and the rise of a woman who refused to be powerless in a world built to cage her. And before we begin this long journey through time, if you liked my video, then please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Marie de Medici entered the world in 1575 inside the powerful fortress palace of the Medici family of Florence. She was born into a dynasty feared, envied, adored, and whispered about in every royal court of Europe. The Medici were not just bankers, they were kingmakers, masters of influence, architects of destiny. From the moment Marie opened her eyes, she was surrounded by symbols of power, frescoed ceilings, gold-woven tapestries, and marble corridors where political plots walked beside her like shadows. But more importantly, she was born into an environment where every breath had meaning, every gesture could spark alliance or war, and every child of the Medici was raised not to live, but to rule. While other noble children played with wooden toys, Marie grew up surrounded by maps, financial ledgers, diplomatic letters, and visitors from every part of Europe. She learned early that silence was often more powerful than words. In rooms where ambassadors from Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Papal States debated, Marie sat quietly at the edge, listening, watching, absorbing. At an age when most children memorize rhymes, Marie was already learning how alliances are built, how secrets are traded, and how a wrong expression can spark a political storm. Her teachers were the best minds Florence could gather. Philosophers, mathematicians, theologians, and spies disguised as scholars. Everything in Marie's upbringing was intentional, every dress, every jewel, every movement. Her mother and tutors drilled a single idea into her. Power is not only held. Power must be seen. Her education included learning to read emotions in others' eyes, performing court dances that communicated social hierarchy, practicing diplomatic smiles, mastering the art of speaking without revealing anything, navigating a room without ever seeming out of control. She learned to understand people not by their words, but by the way they held a cup, the way their voice tightened, or the way they stood when they thought no one was watching. These were not the lessons of a princess. They were the lessons of a future ruler. Life in the Medici palace was a constant parade of activity. Merchants from Venice arrived with silk. Priests from Rome carried secret messages. Noble families whispered alliances behind curtains. Every corner echoed with ambition. Marie saw the truth early. The world was driven by motive, not morality. She would walk through gardens designed as living political theaters. Flowers arranged in symbolic patterns. Statues chosen to send messages to visiting dignitaries. She learned to read these silent symbols like sentences in a book. At night, she watched her family conduct negotiations that decided the fates of cities and kingdoms. Diplomacy, trade, military strategy, all happening not in war rooms, but in candlelit salons over wine and careful smiles. This was her university. This was her training ground. This was where Marie de Medici began to shape herself into something Europe had never seen before. A queen who understood politics better than most kings. By the time Marie reached her 20s, she was fluent in Italian, Latin, French, Spanish, court languages of diplomacy. She could debate philosophy, understand military blueprints, and interpret religious politics. Word began to spread across Europe. The Medici girl is different. She is dangerous. She is brilliant. France, Spain, the Empire, all kept their eyes on her. Her marriage would not be a union of love, but a lightning strike that could shift the balance of power across the continent. And in 1600, the lightning struck. King Henry IV of France, a man notorious for mistrusting women in politics, chose Marie de Medici as his queen. Why? Because he knew she wasn't just a bride. She was a strategic asset. Marie understood this perfectly. She was stepping into the most dangerous court in Europe. And she would not merely survive it. She would bend it to her will. As Marie's wedding procession marched from Florence toward France in late 1600, it resembled not a bridal journey, but a royal invasion wrapped in silk. Her entourage stretched for miles: bankers, artisans, scholars, guards, and advisors. Every step she took toward France was watched by spies, ambassadors, and nobles evaluating her future influence. France wasn't offering her a home. It was offering her a battlefield. Marie understood this clearly. Her marriage to King Henry IV was not a love story. It was a political treaty masked by velvet and gold. When she first crossed into French territory, the cheers of the townspeople were warm, but the eyes of the nobles were cold. She was Italian. She was a Medici. She was rich, too rich. And worst of all, she was intelligent. Dangerously intelligent. The wedding ceremony at Lyon in 1600 was one of the grandest Europe had ever seen, but beneath the celebration was a silent war. To Henry IV. Marie's enormous dowry meant financial rescue for a king drowning in debt. To France, she represented a connection to Italian wealth, culture, and political networks. To Europe, her marriage shifted alliances, threatened power balances, and signaled new diplomatic pathways. And to Marie herself, it marked the moment she stepped into a world where every smile hid a knife. Henry showed her courtesy, even admiration, but their marriage was never equal. He had mistresses, illegitimate children, and a reputation for being unpredictable. Marie entered this marriage with her eyes wide open. She was not a romantic, she was a strategist. France had long disliked foreign queens, and Marie faced hostility the moment she stepped into the Louvre. Whispers followed her like shadows. She is a foreigner. She will ruin France. She is too proud. She brings too much Medici influence. The French court was a nest of competing factions, nobles hungry for power, diplomats maneuvering alliances, priests influencing kings, and mistresses wielding private influence. It was a battlefield without swords. Marie navigated it with the same controlled grace she learned in Florence. She observed quietly. She memorized names, alliances, rivalries. She understood where influence flowed and where it stagnated. She discovered which nobles were loyal, which were treacherous, and which could be bought. Most importantly, she learned that knowledge was her greatest weapon. In 1601, Marie gave birth to her first child, the future King Louis XIII. This single event transformed her position completely. Now, she wasn't merely Henry's Italian wife. She was the mother of the heir, a position of untouchable power. The court that once doubted her now bowed. Priests honored her. Nobles visited her apartments with gifts. Foreign ambassadors scrambled to earn her favor. Motherhood, in royal politics, was not simply a personal joy. It was a political elevation. Marie understood this perfectly. She used her new status to weave alliances, secure connections, and strengthen her influence at court. Her relationship with Henry improved, but his political trust remained limited. Marie often felt like a queen in title, but not in action. Still, she waited. Patient. Strategic. Knowing her moment would come. By 1610, France was thriving under Henry IV's rule. He brought peace, prosperity, and stability. But prosperity invites enemies. There were whispers. There were threats. There were warning signs. And then, on May 14, 1610, the world shattered. King Henry IV was assassinated in the streets of Paris, stabbed to death by François Ravaillac. In one violent moment, France lost its king. And a 9-year-old boy, Louis XIII, became king in name only. Who would rule France now? The answer came like thunder. Marie de Medici. The foreigner. The widow. The woman they underestimated. With Henry's blood still staining Paris, Marie stepped into the role of Regent of France, the most powerful position in the kingdom. Marie's transformation was immediate. Gone was the queen who quietly observed from the shadows. In her place stood a ruler of unwavering authority. She secured the loyalty of the army, calmed the streets of Paris, stabilized the treasury, silenced rivals, reassured foreign powers, protected her son's fragile throne. Her decisions in these first hours prevented civil war. France expected a fearful widow. Instead, it received a political titan. Every lesson Florence taught her, diplomacy, intelligence gathering, emotional control, reading motives, surged into action. Marie's regency began not with weakness, but with precision. She turned the royal palace into the center of European strategic calculation. She met with generals, ambassadors, and ministers. She issued decrees with confidence. She organized young Louis XII's coronation to ensure the stability of the monarchy. The world watched. Europe held its breath. And France realized the truth. Marie de Medici was no temporary placeholder. She was the ruler France needed, and the ruler many feared. The French court, once a battlefield of factions, became a laboratory of Marie's political genius. She reorganized finances. She restructured the military. She built networks of informants. She strengthened France's diplomatic ties. She gave a stage to artists, scientists, and architects. Under her leadership, France's cultural and political identity began to transform. Foreign envoys wrote home describing her as brilliant in diplomacy, shrewd in negotiation, dangerous in intelligence, impossible to deceive. But power always creates enemies. As Marie grew stronger, so did the opposition, especially among the French nobles who resented female authority and feared a foreign regent. Storm clouds gathered around her rule. Yet she remained calm, collected, prepared. A Medici was never afraid of conflict. A Medici was built for it. Marie's regency was powerful, but it was also surrounded by danger. Not everyone accepted her authority. Not everyone wanted a woman, worse, an Italian woman, steering France. The French nobles, who had long enjoyed the chaos of factional politics, suddenly found themselves overshadowed by Marie's discipline, order, and strategic mind. Whispers began gathering like a storm behind palace walls. She is too controlling. She favors the Italians. She is building her own empire. She is tightening her grip on the treasury. The most ambitious nobles saw Marie's strength not as salvation, but as a threat to their ambitions. They formed alliances behind closed doors, trading secrets, promises, and daggers made not of metal but of influence. Marie knew they plotted. She could sense it in their smiles, too stiff, too polite. In their bows, a second too long. In their sudden silence when she entered a room. The Medici instincts sharpened. She understood that her greatest enemy was not a foreign king, but the ambitious men sharing her castle. Marie knew she needed loyal support to survive the turbulence of court politics. Her closest advisor became Concino Concini, an Italian noble whom she trusted with her administrative and diplomatic decisions. Concini became the lightning rod for French resentment. To Marie, he was a stabilizing force. To France's ancient nobles, he was an intruder. The more authority Concini gained, the louder the opposition grew. He was accused of manipulating the queen, controlling the treasury, weakening noble power, dominating royal influence. Whether true or not mattered little. Perception, not truth, shapes rebellion. Marie refused to remove him, not because she was blind, but because she understood loyalty is a treasure in politics. Concini's presence made her stronger, but it also made her a target. The nobles sharpened their knives in the dark. The internal conflict grew steadily. Nobles refused to obey her. Priests murmured against her reforms. Foreign powers tried manipulating France's instability. Paris watched and waited. Marie, once the peaceful regent, became a battle-hardened ruler. She strengthened the army. She increased taxation on the nobility. She asserted control over trade. She placed loyalists in high positions. But the more she tightened her grip, the more the French aristocracy resisted. Their hate focused not on Concini alone, but on Marie herself. The court that once admired her brilliance now called her tyrannical, overbearing, foreign poison. Marie endured all of it with controlled composure. She refused to show weakness. Every gesture remained calculated, calm, queenly. But she knew the storm was coming, and it would come from where she feared most. Not from outside enemies, but from within her own family. Louis XIII was no longer the frightened boy who clung to his mother's presence. He was growing into a young man, a young king, and he felt increasingly overshadowed. At 14, he watched his mother command the kingdom. She controlled the council. She issued decrees. She determined alliances. She defined the movement of France. And Louis watched. The nobles saw their opportunity. They approached the young king with dangerous ideas. "Your mother is ruling in your place. You are king only in name. She trusts foreigners, not you. She does not want to relinquish power." Slowly, they poisoned Louis's mind. Where once he saw a mother protecting him, now he saw a force eclipsing him. Marie felt the distance building. In conversations, his words became sharper. In audiences, he looked to others for approval. In decisions, he hesitated to follow her guidance. The tension was subtle, but undeniable. The boy who needed her was transforming into the king who feared her power. The relationship between Marie and Louis became a silent battlefield. Neither raised their voice. Neither confronted the other directly. But the air between them crackled with unspoken resentment. Louis demanded more control in council meetings. Marie continued guiding him, too often in his eyes. Louis asked for independence. Marie insisted he wasn't ready. Louis wanted to choose his advisors. Marie refused to dismiss Concini. Every disagreement widened the distance. But the truth was more tragic. Marie did not want power for herself. She wanted to protect France, and her son, from the chaos that nobles thrived on. But Louis could not see this. He was a young king trapped between pride and manipulation, and his advisors began urging him toward a decision that would change France forever. A decision dripping with betrayal. In April 1617, the unthinkable happened. Louis XIII, influenced by the nobles who sought to break Marie's power, made a decision that would scar France for generations. He ordered the arrest and eventual killing of Concino Concini. The young king's guards stormed Concini's residence. He was shot on sight. No trial. No warning. No mercy. As the echo of gunfire faded, a message spread through France. The king had seized power, and he had done so by destroying his mother's strongest ally. Marie's world collapsed. She had been betrayed not by a foreign power, not by rivals, but by her own child, the son she raised to be king. The palace erupted in chaos. Nobles celebrated openly. Enemies rejoiced. Her supporters hid or fled. And Marie de Medici, Queen of France, Regent of the kingdom, the Iron Woman of Florence, was suddenly powerless. After Concini's death, Louis XIII turned his attention to Marie. Advised by nobles who feared her return to power, the king made another ruthless decision. He banished his mother from the center of political life. Her supporters were removed. Her influence was erased. Her council was dissolved. Then, the final blow. She was placed under house arrest in the Château de Blois. A queen. A regent. A woman who once controlled the fate of nations. Now confined behind cold stone walls, guarded day and night. Her apartments, once full of diplomats and scholars, became silent. No meetings. No authority. No freedom. Marie was left to reflect on her choices, her loyalty, her devotion, and her son's betrayal. Yet even in imprisonment, she was not defeated. The Medici fire still burned. And Marie de Medici began planning her next move. A plan so daring, so dramatic, that it would shake Europe once again. The chateau that imprisoned Marie was a fortress built to keep people inside. High stone walls, guards at every door, narrow staircases, locked terraces, heavily monitored halls. But it had one weakness. It underestimated the will of a Medici. Marie refused to die forgotten behind those walls. Night after night, she walked the room in silence, studying the angles, the shadows, the routines of her guards. She waited for patterns. She memorized their footsteps. She calculated. And then, one cold February night in 1619, Marie de Medici escaped. With the help of loyal supporters, she climbed out of a window onto a hidden ledge, descended a concealed passage, mounted a waiting horse, and fled into the darkness. By morning, Europe was in shock. The imprisoned queen had vanished. The Medici lioness was free. And she was riding toward Paris with determination blazing in her eyes. Marie's escape ignited a political wildfire. Louis XIII awoke to a nightmare. His mother, the woman he betrayed, was gathering armies, allies, and nobles who resented his advisors. France was suddenly split in two. The king's faction, led by Louis and Cardinal Richelieu. The queen's faction, fueled by resentment and loyalty. Mother and son were now enemies on the battlefield of politics. Letters flew across France like arrows. Soldiers marched. Borders bristled. Marie, fierce as ever, demanded restoration of her authority, removal of her enemies, recognition of her dignity. Louis XIII, pressured by his advisors, resisted. For a moment, the kingdom trembled on the edge of civil war. But then, unexpectedly, peace came from an unlikely source. Cardinal Richelieu, the quiet, calculating priest who had once served Marie. At first, Marie believed Richelieu was her ally, a man whose brilliance she recognized early. She had helped elevate him. She trusted his intelligence. But Richelieu had his own vision for France. A vision where royal authority was absolute. Noble power was crushed. Foreign influence was controlled. France became the strongest nation in Europe. To achieve this, he needed Louis XIII, not Marie. And so, with quiet precision, Richelieu rewired the political structure of France. He soothed both sides, negotiated peace, and brought Marie back to court. But it was a trap in slow motion. Marie returned to Paris not as a regent, not as a partner in power, but as a symbolic figure the kingdom tolerated. Richelieu now controlled the levers of government. Louis XIII trusted him fully. And Marie began to realize the truth. She had not regained power. She had walked into a cage painted gold. Tension grew steadily. Marie demanded more influence. Richelieu blocked her at every turn. The king's loyalty leaned fully toward the cardinal. The court that once trembled at Marie's command now shifted its allegiance toward Richelieu's cold intelligence. Their rivalry turned from whispers to open hostility. Marie accused him of stealing her authority, manipulating her son, weakening France through tyranny. Richelieu, in turn, portrayed her as unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. Louis XIII was forced to choose between the mother who raised him and the minister who guided him. He chose Richelieu. Marie's influence collapsed in an instant. Her allies were dismissed. Her finances were restricted. Her access to political chambers was cut. Then, the final decree. Marie de Medici was exiled from France. The queen who once ruled an empire of influence now became a wanderer across Europe. Marie traveled from court to court, carrying with her the dignity of a queen and the heartbreak of a mother betrayed. She lived in Flanders, Brussels, Cologne, the Spanish Netherlands. Sometimes welcomed, sometimes tolerated, sometimes used as a political pawn. Her wealth faded. Her influence dimmed. Her health declined. Yet her mind remained sharp. She documented her experiences. She wrote letters to kings and queens. She supported artists. Most notably, she commissioned the legendary Marie de Medici cycle, 24 monumental paintings by Rubens depicting her life as a heroic epic. Even in exile, Marie shaped her legacy with the hand of a strategist. She would not allow history to define her. She would define herself. Marie's last years were spent in Cologne, far from the palaces that once trembled beneath her footsteps. She lived modestly, supported by a small circle of loyal attendants. Her days were filled with reflection, prayer, and the creation of her own narrative. She thought often of Florence, Henry IV, Louis XIII, the battles she fought, the power she once held, the betrayals she endured. On July 3, 1642, Marie de Medici died quietly, far from the kingdom she once ruled. She was buried in a simple church, her final resting place unadorned, a stark contrast to the magnificence that defined her life. But history does not measure a queen by where she dies. It measures her by how she lived. Marie de Medici remains one of the most complex rulers in European history. A queen underestimated. A regent who protected France. A strategist shaped by Florence. A mother torn between love and power. A patron who changed the course of art forever. A woman who defied the boundaries of her era. Her life was a tapestry woven from brilliance and tragedy, loyalty and betrayal, power and vulnerability. She made enemies because she refused to be powerless. She shaped France because she refused to be silent. She survived exile because she refused to surrender. Her story is not one of perfection. It is one of resilience. The kind that only true queens possess. Thank you for watching History Without Sleep. If you enjoyed this deep journey into the life and legacy of Marie de Medici, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and continue my next video.